take us inside your new reporting, both about what's been happening with the most wanted list, but also what you're learning when it comes to something called double counting arrests.
Sure, Chris. Well, in terms of the most wanted list, Kash Patel has repeatedly boasted that his administration, his FBI, has had a better rate of catching those fugitives than any previous recent administration, particularly the Biden administration. But when we looked at it, what we realized, and sources inside the FBI are telling us, is that the FBI appears to be nominating fugitives to that list when they know they're about to be captured. So of the 6 fugitives captured during Kash Patel's tenure as FBI director, he keeps saying 8, but actually only 6 were captured while he was the FBI director. 4 of them were nominated within a month of their capture, and 2 were nominated to the list within 24 hours. And in one case, one fugitive was captured in Mexico an hour and 10 minutes after being placed on the list in an operation that obviously took weeks to plan. And so what sources inside are saying is this is obvious gaming of the system. It's great that these fugitives are being captured, but the idea that you're celebrating some prowess about finding these people, that's overblown. And then in terms of the arrest, Kash Patel
can I stop you there? But is it even clear that in I don't want to call it a normal FBI, but in typical circumstances, all of them would have actually been on the FBI's most wanted list?
Well, in fairness, that's a very subjective list. I've done some reporting on it. It's been around for decades, and they do move people around. It's there's no specific criteria. Osama bin Laden was on it for years, and he wasn't caught. And then other people they put on and are caught right away. Other people you've never heard of. But so it's a fair question, though. It's certainly more movement than we've ever seen before under Kash Patel's FBI. And then in terms of the arrest stat that you mentioned, Kash Patel said yesterday that the FBI in 2025 had doubled the number of violent crime arrests than it had done in 2024 in the Biden administration. But what he didn't say was that he changed the policy about how those arrests are counted, according to our reporting, to include arrests where the FBI was present with another agency. The other agency made the arrest and led the investigation, but an FBI agent happened to be there, whether that was state and local police or other federal agencies, including those immigration raids that he's been requiring FBI agents to go on that many of them don't want to be doing. And so that artificially inflated the statistics. But what sources are telling us is there's no larger number of fugitives or arrestees being taken off the street. It's just simply a numbers game. And so what Kash Patel was trying to argue there just wasn't factual, Chris.
Again, so I just want to make sure we're understanding this correctly. So if ICE is there and if local police are there and one person is arrested, that gets counted as 2?
That gets counted as an FBI arrest when it previously would not have been. And I've heard from veterans, maybe Jackie can speak to this, this is not a new idea. The FBI agents in the past have tried to play games with these stats and have sometimes counted arrests where it wasn't really their case, and sometimes supervisors had to come down on them and say, those aren't the stats, we're not counting those. But now we have a bureau-wide policy of counting all of those arrests, including the immigration arrests, and that's what's inflating the stats, according to our sources.
So that does bring me, Jacqueline, to an obvious question. From your experience, have you ever seen anything of this magnitude, either with those arrest statistics or the FBI's most wanted list?
No, I have not. To first address the arrest statistics, in my 25 years serving in the FBI, I never saw that issue. In my personal experience, I never saw such inflation of arrest or any statistics when it comes down to it, because you may have targets, you may have numbers that you were aimed to reach, but if that becomes the sole purpose of arrest to get the highest number, that really lessens the impact. So again, as Ken's reporting says, if this is true, that they're counting arrests made by state and local law enforcement partners or other federal partners, those are not FBI arrests, and they're in fact being double or perhaps even counted, on a triple basis. For the most wanted list, that list has been in existence since 1950. J. Edgar Hoover instituted it for the purpose of catching bad guys at the time. A reporter wanted a list of bad guys. And the purpose throughout the years has been to put individuals on that list who, one, who pose a danger to the public, and 2, whose capture would be assisted by the publicity of the list. So it varies. Sometimes arrests have been made quickly. The pace of the arrest has been, I would say, suspicious over the past year. And it's subjective, again, as Ken's reporting and Ken states, those lists, anyone could be put on it. But I would hope that they're using that list in the correct way to really capitalize on the publicity and on the cooperation of the American public to help catch those violent criminals. And in no way are the questions that I and so many others have or in any way to, detract from the great work that the men and women of the FBI are doing.
Well, Jacqueline, I want to play now some of the questions that are being raised now by Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman.
The problem is that it's very hard then to figure out accurate statistics, to figure out and analyze, all right, what is actually going on? Where is crime going up? Where is it going down? Where should we be putting our resources? How should we be partnering better with other law enforcement agencies?
Does he raise some good questions? Are there dangers, Jacqueline, with manipulating numbers like this?
There are a lot of dangers and there are a lot of questions. I agree with his questions, and I have many more questions. To put out just numbers, it's hard to trust statistics. It's hard to trust honestly the people who are touting those statistics. So there are a lot of questions, and it comes down to what is the risk to the American public, to the mission of the FBI, by inflating those numbers, being so focused on the numbers. The FBI is 1/3 the size of the New York City Police Department. So we have to use our resources in a smart manner, in a efficient way. And we have to ask the question, are those limited resources really being used to get the biggest impact, utilizing and leveraging the skills and the experience and the capabilities of the FBI workforce?
We have some breaking news to tell you about. We are able to report that FBI Director Kash Patel is in, quote, panic mode. We have that brand new reporting breaking moments ago from our colleagues Carol Leonnig and Ken Delanian. It's about the turmoil inside the FBI right now after a string of deeply embarrassing and rather alarming stories about Kash Patel and his tenure as the head of the country's top law enforcement agency. From that new reporting, quote, Kash Patel has ordered the polygraphing of more than 24 former and current members of his security detail and other staff, and has been described as in panic mode to save his job and find leakers among his team. That is according to 2 people briefed on the development. Kash Patel has walled himself off from some senior bureau leaders this week in the wake of multiple media reports that raised red flags about his leadership. What's more, Patel has reportedly avoided meeting with operational leaders at the FBI this week, raising fears that Patel is out of the loop on important investigations and threats. A spokesperson for the FBI declined to comment about the polygraph tests, but he denied that Kash Patel was walled off from senior staff at the FBI. I want to bring in senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig, who's bylined on that. Mark and Melissa are still here. Carol Leonnig, it doesn't sound like someone who's been defamed, does it?
Well, I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on TV. But as a reporter, Nicole, this is a person hunting for leakers pretty actively. And I think you've raised this point before, which is a smart one. How do you claim you're defamed, but also hunt for people who released information that you believe maybe is sensitive or is somehow protected? As we reported at MS Now I can't remember if it was 2 days ago or a day, but it was basically a finding that Patel had ordered this investigation into the leaks or the sources to an Atlantic magazine piece that described how FBI agents were super worried about the leadership of the Bureau because of Patel allegedly engaging in drinking to excess on a pretty regular basis and having to reschedule meetings in the mornings after these quote unquote alcohol fueled events. We also then learned, because once you report one story, more people want to tell you more about other things that disturb them. We learned that Patel has ordered the polygraph of all of these agents, a very large group who used to travel with him and who travel with him now, to try to find out who may be talking to reporters. This is sending a real chill through the FBI, but even more worrisome to them, Nicole, is the way in which Patel has not agreed to meet with lots and lots of other operational leaders in the Bureau. This worries people because there's a regular sort of line of threats and investigations that the bureau director needs to be briefed on and needs some input on. Of course, there are some decision points that he must be involved in, and this is worrying them. I agree that we should emphasize that the FBI spokesperson, Ben Williamson, said that Kash is having meetings with senior leaders, but he wasn't extremely specific about those he's not meeting with. I'm
going to do something I don't always do. I would like to read the piece. It is new since I've been on the air, but I think it's important for our viewers to hear what you're reporting right now exclusively. FBI Director Kash Patel has ordered the polygraphing of more than 24 former and current members of his security detail, and other staff has been described as in panic mode to save his job and find leakers among his team. That's according to 2 people briefed on that development. Patel has walled himself off, as we've been discussing, from some senior bureau leaders this week in the wake of multiple media reports that raised red flags about his leadership. That's according to 3 people familiar with his recent actions. 2 of the people told MS Now that the director ordered the polygraphing this week of the former and current security detail members, as well as several information technology staff. I want to stop here and just, we don't focus in on this, but this is a hallmark of the Atlantic reporting as well. This is deeply sourced. Every line has a minimum of 2, in some instances, 3 sources. Just talk about that level of corroboration.
It's nice of you to ask, because I think this highlights something you may not intend to highlight, but think about what it must be like to work in the FBI or in law enforcement, and as we have described in our reporting, to feel that the Bureau is in danger because of who is directing it. And think about what it must be like to see colleagues and hear colleagues are being polygraphed, or maybe even former colleagues or friends, people who've been fired, and then still be willing to talk to me and to Ken. So I'm grateful to the sources who continue to share information with us, and actually to other reporters as well. Come to us first, but yeah, I think it's pretty impressive. I think it's just really pretty impressive that people feel this information needs to get out and take some risks to do so. The corroboration is important. I thought the Atlantic's corroboration was really impressive as well. A very deeply reported piece of work. I wasn't involved in it, obviously, but they spent a lot of time and energy and confirmed to their solid view of the threshold. They confirmed something that a lot of reporters, including me, had been hearing about for a while and trying to confirm this idea that he had to be rousted in the morning by agents who were concerned that he might be quite ill or worse as a result of alcohol that he had drunk the night before.
I want to read a little bit more from the reporting. The FBI director demanded the polygraph examinations to determine if any members of the team that accompanies him on all his travels or staff who have access to sensitive details about his decisions have communicated with reporters, according to the people who asked to speak anonymously due to threat of retribution. Now, there is nothing sensitive in his travels. He actually posts a lot on social media. He had cameras in the locker room when he traveled to the Milan Olympics and guzzled beer in front of them. What is it? Is it fear that gets them to even carry out an investigation into at least 2 reporters, allegedly, Ms. Fitzpatrick and the New York Times reporter who wrote about his girlfriend?
Yeah. So as we reported in the case of the investigation opened into the Atlantic reporter, sorry, I lost my voice there for a second. Agents and sources told my colleague Ken Delaney in pretty sympathetic tone that, we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't open this probe. And I'm paraphrasing a little here. If we don't open this probe, the agents are fearful they're going to be fired. In the case of the New York Times reporter, Elizabeth Williamson, a former colleague of mine and a great reporter, it appears from the New York Times' very good reporting that was a case where agents were asked to investigate and were able to sort of tamp that down by saying the investigation was not warranted. Apparently, we've moved past that place in a very few number of weeks. And if you'll grant me the liberty, Nicole, I want to emphasize one other thing about polygraphing. In the course of reporting this story today, I learned something new that I'd never heard before, which was that Kash Patel, the director, engaged in another mass polygraphing event when there was a report that he had requested a gun. And apparently an agent had mentioned this on a call with other agents, and that made him sort of subject number one or suspect number one. I actually don't know the name of that agent, but it led to the polygraphing of dozens of agents to try to figure out who had revealed.
Let's stop the tape right there, because what you are witnessing is the absolute, unmitigated meltdown of the highest levels of American federal law enforcement. The mainstream news broadcast does an excellent job of presenting the surface facts, but they are completely missing the terrifying speculative architecture behind Kash Patel's psychological collapse. This isn't just a story about internal workplace friction or a director having a bad week in the press. This is a documented institutional emergency that is actively destabilizing the fundamental integrity of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Think about the sheer gravity of the data manipulation that was just exposed. For months, Patel has been parading across alternative media platforms, boasting that his administration achieved a historic, unprecedented surge in catching America's most wanted fugitives. He repeatedly screamed that his numbers doubled those of the previous administration. But the unsealed operational reality reveals a cheap, desperate numbers game, nominating dangerous federal fugitives to the historic most wanted list mere hours before their pre-planned capture, including one individual who was added to the public list just 1 hour and 10 minutes before being arrested in a long-term coordinated Mexican operation, is a complete mockery of justice. It proves that under current leadership, the apex of American law enforcement has been reduced to a public relations firm designed to inflate the personal resume of its director. But it gets significantly darker. Look at the systematic distortion of nationwide violent crime statistics, re-engineering a decades-old bureau policy to artificially double arrest records by double-counting operations where the FBI didn't even lead the investigation, literally hijacking the hard work of local sheriff departments and forced immigration raids, is a dangerous deception. As Congressman Dan Goldman correctly pointed out, when you weaponize and manipulate federal crime data for partisan theater, you destroy the strategic ability to allocate national resources to protect American communities. You aren't fighting crime. You are manufacturing an illusion. And now the illusion has exploded, sending Kash Patel into what high-level intelligence sources explicitly describe as an absolute panic mode to save his political life. Look at his institutional response to the recent, devastating investigative exposés published by The Atlantic and The New York Times. When a sitting FBI director completely walls himself off from his senior operational leaders, avoiding vital threat briefings and critical counterterrorism updates because he is too busy hunting for internal leakers, the national security of the United States faces an immediate, unacceptable risk. Think about the chilling precedent Patel just set by ordering mass, retaliatory polygraph examinations on more than 24 active and former members of his own personal security detail and internal IT staff. Historically, lie detector tests inside the Department of Justice are reserved for espionage, treason, and highly classified national security breaches. Utilizing the federal investigative apparatus to interrogate federal agents over unclassified, embarrassing press reports about a director's personal conduct, including highly disturbing allegations of regular, heavy alcohol consumption that forced agents to discuss using physical breaching equipment to force entry into his locked room, is a historic, unprecedented abuse of power. It is a culture of raw intimidation and self-preservation, where federal agents are openly stating they are entirely damned if they cooperate and immediately fired if they resist. This terrifying collapse of leadership within our premier intelligence agency raises a massive, haunting question that every single citizen needs to confront. Are we looking at a temporary administrative crisis that can be corrected, or has the premier law enforcement apparatus of the United States been permanently compromised by a culture of fear, loyalty hunts, and personal damage control that will completely destroy public trust in the rule of law for the next generation? Drop your predictions, your detailed institutional analysis, and your raw, unfiltered perspectives in the comments section right below. I read every single breakdown, and I want to see exactly how you decode this deep state crisis. If you are completely done with the shallow, sanitized corporate news spin and want to stay 10 steps ahead of the real power plays shaping Washington before they hit the headlines, smash that like button right now. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss another deep investigative breakdown. Turn on all notifications and click the link in our description to join our completely free daily political newsletter, Pump Politics, to get behind-the-scenes intelligence context sent straight to your inbox every single morning. Stay sharp, stay questioning, and I will see you in our very next investigation. Stay informed.